Take the cross off your neck. You are not worthy to wear it. Judge, you misunderstood me, then listen to the rest of my story. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over Washington, D.C., painting the grand neoclassical buildings with warm hues. Karoline Leavitt, at just 27 years old, was the youngest White House press secretary in history, a title that came with both prestige and immense pressure. As she stepped out of the black government-issued SUV, she adjusted the lapel of her navy blue blazer, ensuring that the small silver cross pinned to it was secure. It was more than just an accessory. It was a symbol of faith, conviction, and the very values that had guided her throughout her career. The courthouse loomed before her, its towering columns exuding an air of solemn authority. Inside, a legal battle was about to unfold, one that would challenge the delicate balance between religious freedom and the neutrality of the judicial system. Karoline had been personally called upon by President Trump to oversee this case, an assignment that signaled both trust and an immense responsibility. As she walked through the grand entrance, the weight of the moment settled upon her. The marble floors echoed softly under her heels, and the murmur of voices from journalists and legal observers filled the space. Everyone in attendance knew that today's hearing was about more than just a single lawsuit. It was about precedent, about principle, about defining the limits of personal expression within the public sphere. The case revolved around a high school teacher who had been suspended for praying with students in a public school setting. The plaintiff argued that such actions violated the constitutional principle of secular education, while the defense contended that it was a matter of individual rights and religious freedom. Karoline had been tasked with defending the latter position, and she knew that the outcome of this case would set a precedent that could ripple across the country. But as she made her way toward the courtroom, she was met with an unexpected obstacle. A stern voice called out from the bench as soon as she stepped inside. "Ms. Leavitt, before we proceed, I must ask you to remove that cross." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Karoline, then shifted toward the judge presiding over the case, Judge Charles Hargrove, a man known for his strict interpretation of judicial neutrality. His gaze was sharp, unwavering, as he gestured toward the small yet significant symbol on her blazer. Karoline took a steady breath, standing firm. She had anticipated challenges in this case, but she had not expected to become the center of controversy before the hearing had even begun. And now, in the heart of the courtroom, she was faced with a question more profound than any legal argument. Where did the line between neutrality and personal freedom truly lie? The atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavy from the very first moments. The sharp crack of Judge Hargrove's gavel echoed through the chamber, a stark warning that he would not tolerate any actions that might compromise the neutrality of the court. Karoline sat with her back straight, her eyes never wavering as she met the judge's gaze from his elevated bench. "Before we begin the arguments," Judge Hargrove announced, his steely gaze sweeping over Karoline, "I need to clarify something. Ms. Leavitt, I see that you are wearing a cross on your blazer. I am instructing you to remove it. The courtroom is a neutral space, and no religious symbols should be displayed here." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Some attendees exchanged hushed whispers, while journalists in the back rows quickly scribbled down notes, sensing the weight of the moment. Karoline could feel the weight of every gaze upon her, waiting to see how she would respond. Slowly she rose to her feet, her fingers grazing the small silver cross that gleamed subtly on her lapel. It was more than an ornament. It was a symbol of faith, of justice, of the very values she had sworn to uphold. "Your Honor," she spoke, her voice calm yet firm, "under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, I have the right to express my faith freely, as long as it does not interfere with my duties here. Wearing a personal symbol does not alter the nature of this case." Judge Hargrove crossed his arms, his expression unreadable, though there was a flicker of challenge in his eyes. "So, you are arguing that expressing personal faith in a courtroom is permissible?" "Precisely," Karoline nodded. "Just as a judge may wear a legal insignia or a journalist may carry a pen and notebook, I have the right to keep my symbol. It does not compromise the neutrality of this court, but rather affirms my personal rights." A long silence followed. No one in the room dared to speak. Finally, Judge Hargrove leaned back in his chair. I will allow you to continue wearing it, he said, though his tone carried clear disapproval. But I warn you, this trial will not be influenced by personal beliefs. Justice has no religion, no bias, only truth and the law. Caroline sat down, feeling her heartbeat echoing in her chest. This was only the beginning, and she knew the battles ahead would be far more difficult. With her personal matter momentarily set aside, the court proceeded to the central debate. The case at hand involved the right to religious freedom in public spaces. A teacher who had been suspended for praying with students on school grounds. Karoline was representing the White House's stance that the teacher had not violated the law, while the prosecution argued that such actions compromised the neutrality of public education. Richard Evans, the plaintiff's attorney, was a seasoned litigator known for his sharp arguments. He stood stepping confidently into the center of the courtroom, his gaze locking onto Karoline. "Your Honor," he began, his tone unwavering, "this case is not about personal faith. It is about its impact on an environment where every student, regardless of belief, must feel protected. When a teacher, a figure of authority, prays with students, it creates an unspoken pressure. Those who do not share the same beliefs may feel isolated or compelled to participate to avoid social exclusion." Caroline studied him for a moment before rising. "Your Honor, I do not deny that teachers play an influential role in students' lives. But if we entirely prohibit personal expressions of faith, we weaken their right to free speech. A person's act of prayer does not equate to coercion." Evans smirked slightly, a knowing glint in his eye. "Ms. Leavitt, do you not acknowledge that there is a fine line between religious freedom and societal pressure?" Caroline remained steady. "I believe that line must be balanced with reason. If we erase all traces of faith from public spaces, are we not violating the very freedoms that the Constitution seeks to protect?" A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Judge Hargrove struck his gavel again, demanding order. His gaze was sharper than before as he looked at Caroline. "You are arguing that the government should not interfere with any form of religious expression in public spaces?" Caroline drew in a deep breath. "I am arguing that every citizen has the right to express their faith, as long as they do not impose it on others. If a teacher is dismissed simply for praying, then their rights are being unjustly stripped away." A heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Every eye was fixed on Judge Hargrove, awaiting his reaction. At last, he placed both hands on the bench, his voice deliberate and authoritative. "Ms. Leavitt, I do not question your ability to argue your case," he said. "But do you understand that if we do not set boundaries, one day, those very boundaries may be erased, and justice itself may become a matter?" The courtroom fell into silence after the heated arguments. Caroline sat up straight, her gaze fixed on Judge Hargrove, waiting for the final verdict. She had defended her stance to the very end, but the outcome was still uncertain. Judge Hargrove, known for his strict and rigid demeanor, looked down at her, his sharp eyes showing something different this time. He tapped his gavel lightly, then spoke, his voice resonating through the courtroom. "After reviewing all the arguments, I realize that this case is not just about the law. It is about the true meaning of freedom." He paused for a moment, letting his words settle in the air, then continued. "Ms. Leavitt, I doubted you from the beginning. I believed that the presence of a religious symbol on your attire was inappropriate in this courtroom. But now I realize that the mistake was not yours. It was in the way I perceived the issue." The courtroom remained silent. A judge like Hargrove, known for his rigid principles, was now admitting his mistake. "I apologize," Ms. Leavitt's shock rippled through the room. Caroline remained composed, but deep inside, she knew this moment meant more than any victory. Hargrove struck his gavel one last time. "The court rules that the teacher in this case has not violated the law. Every citizen has the right to express their faith, as long as they do not impose it on others." The trial was over. A few people clapped softly, while Caroline quietly stood up and walked out of the courtroom. As she stepped outside, the sunlight reflected off the small cross on her blazer, a reminder that justice still exists, and sometimes it takes those who dare to stand up and defend it.